I'm Morgan,
And I'm Megan.
twins and hosts of M&M Chat, a monthly podcast that brings together our many commonalities, motherhood, farm life, fitness, chasing our passions, and go chat. It is our goal to create a show that is positive, real, and fun. This
Hey
month, we are
guys.
talking all about calving season and beef prices.
I guess we didn't talk about who would be doing the next line. So yes, like Morgan said, we're talking about calving season and beef prices, and we are just excited to be back here for another episode. This month is just a fun month for us. It's both the day month, and we're
Woo
on
woo.
spring break, and yeah, it's just a good month. So we're diving in today on calving season since that is also beginning, and we thought it would be very timely. So we have a couple articles that we're going through again tonight. One is specifically on calving season and when is kind of a good time to be doing some calving. There's different seasons. Some farmers do like a spring calving season, some do fall, some do two calving seasons, and we'll kind of dive into that. But then we also have an article that is on beef prices and why it seems like those prices seem to be increasing over the last couple of years. So, first of all, let's just kind of dive in with what's going on the Ball farm and the Hibbs farm. And you guys have already had a calf on the ground this year.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of you guys, you can't hold him up. Speaking of a new calf on the ground, Levi's in my arms. And if you hear any cooing and things like that, just since you can't really see him in the video, Levi's here with us too. So his first podcast experience. But calving season, so yes, we've had one calf. It's from one of our heifers. And so for those of you who I'm sure some of the terminology and stuff, some of you might be very familiar with it who are listening to our podcast, and some of you might be new to agriculture. And so, just to clarify, a heifer is a cow who has yet to have a baby. And so we watch them very closely. And so this year we have three heifers that are expected to have a baby here in this month. And so they are actually, we've separated them from the rest of the cows so that way we could keep a better, closer eye on them. And I'm very impressed with our bull for the first heifer that had a calf. So we've had one of them calve already, and she actually calved on one of the coldest days in February. We were having 60-degree weather, nice sunny days. I was going on walks, and then the next day it was a cold came through, the cold snap came through, and it was really windy and very cold. And so that night she had our calf, and she was starting to lick it off, and she was starting to take care of it, and it was trying to get up. So we left it down there. But then when Tyler and Dad went to go check on it around 10 p.m., it was still shivering, and it had been a couple hours since she had had it. So at that point, if you don't get colostrum in them, so just like humans, all mammals need that colostrum, which is that first milking, and it's got all of the good immune boosting nutrients in it to help them get a good start and to build antibodies. And so, since it hadn't really made a whole lot of progress, they ended up giving it some colostrum supplement and brought it up to Tyler and I's shop, and it stayed in our shop all night. And we actually put it in Diesel's dog kennel. But when we went out in the morning, Dean was so excited to go find the calf because when I woke him up, I said, Dean, there's a surprise for you in the shop. I said, you might want to go look out there. And he goes out there, and the calf had gotten out of the dog kennel.
Oh,
I don't know
geez.
how it did, but it was just laying by the truck. Thankfully,
Oh,
it can't do much harm when it's that new. But um, yeah, so Dean had a lot of fun seeing the new baby calf in there. And then we gave it half of a bottle because it seemed like it was doing really good. So we were like, well, let's just maybe give it a little bit, and then we'll take it back to down to the cow and see if then he'll finish nursing from her. And she claimed it right away, and it took a little bit, but he started figuring it out, and it was a good end to the story. But that's the first one we've had so far. So we'll see, hopefully praying that the rest of the season goes well
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that because sometimes it's not the case. Growing up on the farm, a lot of times if the calf didn't start nursing right away or the mom didn't fully clean it off, then it was like sometimes an unhappy ending to the story versus like in this case, the calf went back out to the mom and she claimed it and started nursing, took a little bit, but it was like the mom accepted it again. And so it's like part of farming too, where if it's a cold day and it doesn't always, like if the calf isn't doing good, it sometimes doesn't always work out for the best, which is unfortunate, but that's just kind of calving season in Iowa. A lot of times farmers will calve between March and like end of May in that window, it seems like here in Iowa. And that's because it's starting to get nice out. It's not so cold, but you can still have those cold winter March days.
Hmm.
And the goal too is that there's not a lot of mud because it always sucks when you're trying to pull a calf when it's all muddy.
Yeah. Yeah. Really, we've been having good weather so far. Hopefully it stays that way. I know we need some rain and things like that, but the ground seems pretty dry that it will soak up all that rain that we need. Because like you said, mud is
Mud is
almost
almost.
worse than like cold frozen days.
Yeah.
Um, and I would say like so we actually the heifers I'm kind of surprised because it was like 2 weeks ago. Well, actually Levi's 3 weeks now, so it was 3 weeks ago because it was right when we got back from the hospital. And we haven't seen the other heifers really show one maybe shows a little bit of signs that she's getting close. But Megan and I were just talking about when we were preparing for this podcast. Um, it's better to have your calves closer together. So it's kind of unfortunate that one is 3 weeks ahead of the other ones because that means that they're going to be kind of slow to come in. So we might be even calving up until May. And I know we have a couple of cows when we did our pregnancy checks that are due later in the spring or summer.
Yeah.
And that's because our bull is pretty young and so he's pretty inexperienced.
And we only
Um,
have one.
yeah, one for 25 cows. And they kind of say 1 to 30 is the ratio of like kind
Yeah.
of the max that you would want. So for having a young bull and then having 25 cows or so, but it's better to have them closer together so that way it's maybe more stressful right all together, but then the similar size at weaning, you can kind of get them all vaccinated at the same time and things like that. So there's benefits to having a close calving window.
And I would say even for the labor of it too, like you said, it's more stressful to have them close together, but then you get them all done and you don't have it so spread out. Because if you have it so spread out, then you have to, it's like laborious to go out there multiple times a day to check on them or in the middle of the night if it's getting close. And even like for scheduling, if people have walk off the farm or vacations, different things like that, if you have them closer in a closer window, then you're not spread so thin so for so long.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember Megan and I, our senior year of high school, um, we our secretary was super nice and Megan and I actually are I think maybe our junior and senior year, we would come home during lunch during calving season and check on the cows and that way if any of them were calving or showing signs, we could call dad or we could call the vet. We weren't able to stay and help because we had to get back to school. But we were able to at least check on them and see for any signs. Now, Tyler's been able to take some time during lunch to check them in the past, but since I'm on maternity leave, I've been able to run down there with the boys, and do a quick check. And if I need help, I can call Tyler or anyone. But yeah, like you said, it is pretty labor intensive, and we only have 25 cows. So imagine the farms that have 100 cows or 400 cows that are calving all year or having two calving seasons. So we talked about that we
Yeah.
have a spring calving season. But so Megan, what are kind of some of the benefits? So like, and same with if you want to talk kind of on what Johnsons do a little bit and how it's different compared to like what you grew up with. What does the kind of different calving seasons look like?
Yeah, so I would say the Johnson family has like 300 head of cattle, so quite a few. But they typically try to calve in the spring as well. Sometimes they have early calves, like they already have had a few calves. And I feel like when I first started dating Kyle, they were more year round. It seemed like they were always having calves, but over the years they've tried to get them synced so that they're more spring again. And then he feeds them out up until the fall, winter. And it is kind of nice for them to have them spaced out a little bit in their situation because then they have some ready for market in early
Hmm.
fall, some ready for market in like winter, and some ready for market now. So then they start cleaning out the barn, getting ready for the new calves. But then also the making an income throughout the year and not just selling them all at once. Plus, the calves get huge, so they take up more space in the barn. So if you can kind of have like a pen that's like smaller calves, medium calves, larger calves, then you're constantly selling a trailer load here and there, versus all at once.
Yeah. And having them separated by size like that helps a lot with feeding because the bigger calves aren't going to take all the feed from the smaller calves. And that's like with one thing with us, having them kind of having a wider calving season is that some of the little calves get pushed out of the way, like even in the
Yeah.
creep feeder or things like that. And having them, and then like you said, having them in that, having the different pens, then you would have a paycheck multiple times a year from them.
Yeah.
So there's pros and cons to both.
And it was kind of
Um,
interesting too, because in that article, the one about the calving season, it's farmprogress.com. They were talking about how out west, the reason they calve when they do is because they have open range, like cows, and so the cows get sent off, and they want to breed the cows before they get sent off into the prairie, into the mountains, things like that, because the likelihood of them getting bred is smaller. Like the percentage of them getting bred is smaller, and they still might get bred, but it's not going to be as consistent. One might get bred this time, one might get bred at this time, so they're not consistent. So they like to breed them all before they send them out to go to the open range pasture.
yeah. And one way that they can do that, so we have a bull on our farm, but we kind of dabbled in AIing a little bit when we were showing. And many farmers would either they can even sync their cows
Yeah,
with hormones to get them all in heat at the same time and then AI them, or even help sync them in heat, and in that way the at least the bull can try to get most of them around the same time.
yeah,
The benefits of that is like at least with AI, like you could add variety and diversity and genetics into your herd. So you could add in like some easy calving, or you could try different genetics. You could do different breeds if you wanted to add in some variety. You could, if you have a cow that's pretty big framed, you could choose a bull that has a little bit bigger calves and things like that. So
yeah.
AI gives you so many options.
It does. And I feel like it depends on like the goals too. Like Johnson sometimes will try to AI like 20 of them, and then if anybody local wants to buy them for forage calves, and they're like always willing to sell those. So it kind of depends on like your goal with it. And like you said with the genetics, with having a bull, you can't always keep back every heifer
Hmm.
because it starts to be weather related. So if you AI, then you don't have to worry about that as much.
Yeah, definitely. So Megan and I on the Ball family farm, and I'm not sure how there's so many different ways that you could do this, but with the spring calving season, it tends to change in like weather and sicknesses can happen. And one of the sicknesses that can take place in calves is something called scours. And scours is a form of diarrhea that is actually life-threatening in small calves, and they can become dehydrated very quickly. And so one thing that we've done in the past is we've given the cows scours vaccines. And so this is a vaccination that will cross through the from the cow to the calf in the growth of the gestational period, and then the calf is protected, at least a little bit more protected, while it's cold season and flu season, just like with
Gives it
people,
a
how
little
when the
boost.
yep, when the weather changes, they can get sick easier. This year with everything going on and with baby Levi here and stuff like that, it just seemed like time got away from us. And so
Hmm.
we missed the window to do the vaccinations this year, but Tyler found we watched this YouTube channel called Sunny Brothers or Sunny Farms, excuse me, and he has really good YouTube videos. And they have quite a few cows. And one thing that they sell is this paste. It's called Optimizer Gel. So it's a gel that you actually give the newborn calf, and it's got contains lactic acid producing bacteria, egg proteins, and vitamins to keep your calf healthy and make it easier to instead of having to run all the cows through to get vaccinations, you just give them a little bit of this paste on their tongue when they are born. So you would do it at the same time as tagging and banding and things along those lines. And so we're gonna try it this year, see how it works, and see. I mean, the downfall though is we realized that with our scours vaccines, we usually pull them too for lice and mange. And
Yeah.
so we'll do that when we do pink eye shots, but it's a time that we
Yeah.
yeah, just
You
kind
had
of weighing
to,
like how many times you want to bring all the cows through the pens or
yeah, you have to keep us updated on if it seems to be working or Morgan definitely is, since she lives out on the farm, she gets more of that firsthand experience, whereas I go out when I can and take Andrew out there and help when we get them all in to do preg checking or like she said, vaccinations or pouring them for lice and mange and different things like that. But so you have to let me know if it is working or if we want to go back to the scour shot. So
yeah. What's funny is I sent this YouTube channel to Dad and he's been watching them and he's like getting all excited and getting like super motivated. He's like, because I feel like sometimes, you know how like older farmers and stuff are like, they're just used to doing things the way that they've always
yeah,
done it, the way that grandpa's always done it. Like, and with dad working full time off the farm and stuff like that too, he's just like, what we're doing is fine. And
yeah.
sometimes I feel like Tyler and I like bring these new ideas and we're like, we should try this or we should do that. Well, it was pretty funny the other night. He was like, "So I was watching the Sunny Farms video and they did this. Maybe we should try this summer." And it's kind of funny to see him super excited about
Yeah,
different things.
he's getting rejuvenated about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need that, like with anything that you're passionate about, sometimes you just need like some new motivation and some new ideas to bring to try.
Yeah.
It was kind of interesting because the other day I was out on the farm with Kyle and I saw, like those three-sided little white sheds that I feel like we had growing up in our pastures.
Yeah.
There was one just sitting up by the hay bales on the Johnson farm. And I was like, everybody used to have those three-sided sheds. Like, what what will they, I mean, obviously I kind of know what they're for. Like it was to like block the wind and like calves could go in there. Kyle said his family had used them for like pigs when they had pigs on the farm
Hmm.
way back in the day. So that's probably like grandpa had pigs too, our grandpa. So it could have been for pigs. But then they put like a board across it so that the cows couldn't get in and just the calves could get in. Like I remember
Mm.
dad doing that too. And
Yeah.
then this one that I saw also had it. And it was kind of funny because I just like told Kyle, I'm like, everybody had those. Everybody. Why don't we
Yeah.
use those anymore? Like, do we just have like in his case, they have a monoslope barn and the calves, like once they get bigger, go in there, but not the cattle with the calves out in the pasture. And like sometimes buildings can block wind or different setups that people have, but it's just kind of interesting how things change over time and like what is in like popular, everybody does the trend and like
Hmm.
now you hardly ever see little sheds out in pastures.
Mm-mm. No. And I wonder if I was reading an article from I think it was from Farm Bureau about how you can protect calves throughout the winter when it's really cold out and stuff. And they said it actually, so with the body heat and the having a rumen digestive system when they're eating hay and stuff like that, the rumen is actually creating energy and creating heat. And so, and they eat more in the winter. So their body is kind of creating actually more heat because they want to stay cool in the summer. And it
Yeah.
said that cattle will um create quite a bit of body heat around them and that they probably prefer actually the cold days more than the summer hot days when they can't get away from it
Yeah.
and when there's flies and things like that. And so it's just kind of interesting that a lot of people probably driving by see cows out in the pasture like when it's cold out and things
And
and
like,
they might, oh, the poor cows, like they should be in a barn or something like that. Um, and having shelter and things is always good. And having, oh, like you said, a windbreak is a good idea to have because the wind is probably the worst thing.
yeah.
But like having snow or having cold, they kind of probably prefer that over like a 90-degree
Well, and if
day.
you think about like deer are still out in the winter. And if
Hmm.
you think about Montana, you'll see buffalo. So it's like those are animals that are out and about in the winter time. They don't go and hibernate like a bear. So and they, I mean, they're wild and they live and they're protected. And so,
And
like you
deer
said, it's
probably
probably
have
that
less.
body heat.
Yeah, 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 because deer would be a ruminant animal too, I would
Yeah.
think. Um, so the other kind of piece of this that we wanted to talk about was why are cattle prices so high right now? So if you've been to like Fairway, and we did an episode on food prices and how food is the cost of it is rising. And so this kind of relates to that. But if you go to like Fairway, like Tyler and I just bought our first um round of beef from our farm, which was really exciting. And it was kind of amazing to see like how much we were spending on beef and then now buying it bulk and having it in the freezer and I'm not having to go buy it from the grocery store every week, like how expensive it is.
Hmm.
And looking at a pound of hamburger at Walmart right now is like $7 pretty much.
Yeah.
And so this other article that we found was talking about why are cattle prices so high. And so one of the biggest things it said is that cattle numbers have been on the decline in the last few years, mostly because of the drought. And this has to do with a lot of the cattle states like Nebraska, Montana, the Dakotas, where they've been having a lot of summers with drought, so they aren't able to make enough hay and they don't have enough pasture for summertime. And so a lot of farms are having to sell some cattle to be able to feed them all. And then I thought it was interesting because then there was been wildfires right now in Texas, and there was a lot of farmers that have been having to find places for their cows to go because their farms are getting burnt up by the fires. And so I'm curious to see if that will have an additional raise on the prices of the beef because of them having
Yeah.
to pull those cows too.
Yeah, it is crazy to think with all the droughts that we've been having. We've had crazy weather recently and the forest fires and another reason they said was because of COVID. So it said COVID-19 threw a curveball. So a lot of people were in that panic mode and buying like more than what they needed. So, because they were anticipating a shortage, and that resulted in a higher demand for the beef, so then that price for the beef skyrocketed. And now with the wars and stuff that we have going on in the world, it also said feed costs are up. So corn and soy and wheat, so it's costing more to feed your cattle and not like just the hay like Morgan was talking about, but also the corn and things like that. So with all of the things that happen on in the world, it really affects food prices
Hmm.
and how farmers can feed their animals. And so it's just kind of crazy that we're still dealing with some of these like these effects of like COVID-19 and different things
And
that
from,
have
yeah,
like,
from 2020, yeah, 4 years
yeah.
later.
Yep.
I think it's also a good reminder that like everything's not black and white. Like
Yeah.
so many people like want their food like with certain labels, like we've talked about that before. Like they want grass fed or they want organic or they want pasture eggs, free range chickens. They want all these different things. And then you have to think about, well, what is sustainable for like my operation? Like with corn and soybean prices being so high, like Tyler and I and dad last year, and like we tried, like we kind of were doing like kind of grass fed grain finished. So in the beginning, we were just giving a little bit of grain to kind of keep that marbling and stuff. but then
Yeah.
mostly giving them hay. And then towards the end, started increasing their grain because we want that corn-fed flavor, and also
Yeah.
it takes so much longer for grass-fed to finish out. But we didn't have to pay for the grain as much all year because we started slowly with them. And I think it's a good reminder of like we with our growing population and with all the weather things, we have to use what's available to us and not ship things in, like use like the space that we have around us, the land that we have available. And people also want the small farms to stay around.
Hmm.
Then we also can't be like making all these rules of like you have to do this or the demand for this or like things like that, because that's what's
Yeah.
putting small businesses out of small farms out of business. And like there's been a lot of pig farms recently that have been going out of business because they can't keep up with like the industry, um
All
like
the
all the
regulations.
requirements for the barns to keep them with all the biosecurity things and all these things that are good, not necessarily bad
Like they're
things.
not
Like
bad things. It's just you have to, like you said, it's not black and white. You have to look at the whole picture, and
mhm.
it seems so easy on paper sometimes. Like, oh, why can't everybody just do it this way? Like this is the way that would be best for the animals, or this would be the best for us as consumers. But it's like we also have to have the ability, I think, to choose. Like if someone wants to eat grass-fed beef and they're willing to pay that premium, go for it. But if you, like you said, the corn fed at the end actually has really good flavoring to your beef. And so there's nothing wrong with corn fed beef. Like most cows in Iowa are corn fed beef, and it's absolutely amazing and delicious. And we have
And
corn in
that's what we
Iowa.
have
So
available. Yeah.
yeah, we have corn in Iowa. So we might as well use it to feed our own livestock versus like shipping in more hay because we don't have like a ton of most farmers have a little bit of hay ground, but they don't have enough to only feed animals hay. Like we'd have to ship some in, and like you said, those droughts. So like, yeah, it's just like a
Yeah.
big chain.
I don't know if you listened to the Discover Ag podcast when they were talking about sheep trail.
Yeah, I was. I did listen to
So
that one.
I just did it with my sixth graders. I showed them the video. There's a sheep trail video on YouTube that talks about why they send their sheep out. And so essentially, you guys, there's this ranch in Montana that sells the wool to a company that makes American made clothes for like skiing and snowboarding, and they make sweaters and outdoor clothes out of sheep wool. And so this family ranch has like, I think they said they have like 800 sheep or something like that. And they will be processed too for meat too, some of them, because obviously you are going to have wool from them, but then the boys and stuff like that would be processed for meat. But for the main business, it's the wool. And they go on what's called a sheep trail, and they travel with the sheep throughout the summer, and they go on like week-long journeys, and they walk with the sheep. And there's these farm hands and the family and the brothers that walk with the sheep on horseback with sheep dogs to protect them from predators, and they camp at night. And I
So
showed the
almost is
video.
like bringing it back to the way that they used to do it.
Yeah, and I showed the video to my students, and they will like kind of like you just said, they will like, haven't we advanced past this? Like, what are we doing? And I said, but think about Montana's landforms. Like close to the farm, they probably have the hay ground that they need for the winter. And then it's so vast, they don't even have fences in a lot of the areas. And so they have um, sheepdogs and stuff that keep them and kind of round them up. But I said, the mountains is where the lush green grass is that they were talking about in the video. So they
Yeah,
follow the sheep like up the mountain, and sheep can climb the mountains, and they do it better than cows and stuff do. And so I'm like, you're using land that you can't crop,
yeah,
so you're feeding the sheep something that you can't grow on. You can't grow apple trees on very well. You can't grow tomato plants on very well because
yeah,
it's so mountainy. And so it's just like it's actually more sustainable to do it this way. And
yeah.
it really got the sixth graders thinking about like different styles of farming and ranching and
Well, and that's the thing too, is we're pretty modern here in Iowa when it comes to farming practices and the technology that we use in our tractors and our combines and planters and And like you said, people are still doing the way of farming out west in parts of the United States. And I think we get used to like what we see here. But when I traveled out west to Montana or North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, uh, I was amazed of how vast it was. And like you
Mhm.
went a couple hours before you ran into another gas station. So it is like if you want to let your cattle free range or your sheep free range, then they have that ability. But somebody's got to be watchful of them, or they have to have cattle crossings or different things to like protect them and keep them so that they don't get mixed up with the neighbor's cattle.
Yeah, and that's where we had a good conversation about branding. I was like, so that's one reason why in out west it's so important that you brand cattle because if they wander off, ear
You know
tags
whose
can
is
easily
whose.
yeah, ear tags can easily fall out or fade and things like that. And then also we were talking about though, like, well, why don't they take just like four-wheeler and stuff like that or trucks? Like, why are they still using horseback? Like that seems kind of like, yeah, old fashioned. And I was like, well, what do four-wheelers need? They need gas. And if you're out in the middle of nowhere,
Yeah,
horses just need a little bit of water. You need to find a creek and some feed, and then they'll eat grass along the way too.
yeah,
And so I'm like, it's a lot more efficient to take a horseback, and then they can go on the mountains easier than like a
yeah,
four-wheeler.
yeah. Because I mean, even when we went to Missouri, there's some places that I wouldn't have wanted to take the four wheeler when we side by side riding. It's like you can't take the four wheeler everywhere.
Yeah. We have just about 5 minutes left. So the last thing kind of maybe to talk about here is with calving, there's a lot of things like Megan and I were talking about in the beginning how that calf had to go in our shop. Um, there's a huge need right now for large animal vets. Our closest vet is either Williamsburg, Kelowna, or West Branch. And so just kind of a plug out there needs to be some larger animal vets and calving season, like vets, like just give them props because there's sometimes that there's two vets at a office or something like that. They switch being on call. And if you call them at 10 o'clock at night, they come out to your farm and help with pulling a
Hmm.
calf. And so um, we just take a lot of pride in the care of our animals and making sure that they are happy and as healthy as they can be. And then we have great vets that are local that help out if you have an emergency.
Yeah, yep, I echo that for sure. Even Gary, my father-in-law, said the other day a vet came out from Kelowna and had her son with her, and her son's about Andrew's age, and he was just tagging along for the day, and she had a ton of calls since it's starting to be that spring season, and yeah, he was a trooper and was just like tagging along with mom. So they have families too, but they're on call and willing to come out and help farmers out and do C-sections on cattle and pull calves that are too big or not coming on their own and um, stitch cattle up and just different things, even helping when calves are sick or different things. So, though
Yeah,
definitely we are grateful and appreciative of them.
yeah. Do you want to know something funny real quick?
Yeah.
So at the hospital when I was in labor with Levi, I was talking to the nurse and I was like, so like since I'm like because I was kind of nervous like with going in for a scheduled C-section, I was like will my body know like to produce colostrum and milk and stuff like that? Because if I don't go naturally, like how long
They're
will
going
it
to be
take for
ready.
yeah, and I said because I said not to compare myself to cows, but I said I live on a farm and I know how important colostrum is and stuff like right away. So like, will my body know to give it right away? And she goes, I guess it is kind of like, yeah, I'm sure. I guess I never really thought about that. But yeah, mammals, like all mammals would make colostrum. So yeah, I guess yeah, the calves probably need colostrum too, don't they? I learned something new today. And then she said, she goes, but the cows are probably giving like a half a liter or more of colostrum.
Yeah.
She goes, little Levi just needs about a tablespoon at first. So she's like, I don't even know if it was a tablespoon. I think
I
it
think
might have
it's
been
like,
like a pinky, like a
yeah,
teaspoon. And
yeah.
she's like, so your body will have enough for him to to get that little teaspoon in. She's like, don't worry about it.
I did something similar when I had Andrew. Like we after my C-section, they brought me back into the room and I got to hold Andrew and like within a couple like minutes after me like giving him kisses and like hi and stuff like that, I was like, should I try feeding him? And she's like, sure, are you feeling up to it already? Like, do you think he's ready to go? And I was like, well, with calves, like you expect them to get up and start drinking and nursing right away. And if they don't, you're like, we got a time crunch. We got to get them up. And
Yeah.
she started laughing, and I was like, I don't know, is that weird? Do most people wait a little? She's like, honey, if you're feeling up to it, go for it. All power to you. So I was like, okay. So we did, and he did pretty well.
That's pretty funny. Oh my goodness. Well, you guys, if you have any questions about cattle and calving season and beef in general and the labels that we talked about, that's something that I'm super passionate about is just like educating about all the different like all types like food in America. We have a safe food system and farmers that care. Like it's only gonna benefit the farmer to care about their animals. And so
hmm
there's you won't meet someone I mean, there's
There's
always a bad
always one bad egg,
one bad
and
apple in the bunch.
yeah,
But farmers, like we had our calf up in our shop. Like farmers care about their cows and their calves, and
and they're gonna do what they can.
they're gonna take pride in that. So, if you ever have any questions, just let us know. If there's ever a topic you want us to cover, we'd be happy to do that as well. Please share our podcast and comment, leave a review, and we're just so thankful for everyone who listens. And yeah, so thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Have a wonderful rest of your month, and we'll see you in April.
Yep. Bye.